Truly disruptive. Now, speaking of disruptive, we have an experiment that we're going to do, which was first suggested by Craig Mundy last year. So every year we've had more and more people who are CTOs of great companies joining us, probably because this is a big brain conference. And we thought, well, what do we do with these smart guys? And Craig said, well, I didn't feel challenged enough, when it was my turn. So we thought, all right, what can we do? And we thought, we'll do something different. And then, of course, we have this resource named David Brin. And we realized the first year that we had David here, we had to keep bringing him back every year. But it's always for something different. And he wears so many hats, it doesn't matter what we ask him to do. And this year, it turns out he's just finished doing a television series called ArchiTechs, which is I think, quite fascinating. It's the kind of thing that probably you wish you were doing yourself. And we thought if we could overlay this on the idea of having our CTO Roundup, it might be either really cool and exciting or a complete mashup and mess. So we're about to find out how it'll work. It's an experiment. We ask you to bear with us, but we think it'll be a lot of fun. David will explain the details to you, but essentially it'll start now. It'll go on in the breakout this afternoon, and then they will come back to you on Friday morning with some solutions to a design challenge. And to give you a sense of how this works, David's brought us a DVD. And Scott, if we have that we could queue up now, it'll show you or give you a basic idea of how this worked on the television series, and then we'll try and run something like that here on stage.
The Humvee, America's go-anywhere, do-everything vehicle. On battlefields around the world, wherever our armed forces operate, the Humvee is there. Strong, versatile, and swift, fulfilling a multitude of roles. And yet, with the shape of war changing, this radical vehicle designed originally for the Cold War finds itself in the line of fire 24/7. And as demands are placed upon it for which it was never designed, the Humvee is reaching its limitations and a search is on for its successor. And so, with the unprecedented cooperation of the US military, we've assembled a team of experts in search of a solution. Our think tank will take the Humvee into the future.
They're going to have us sitting in the back benches of that.
Without having to leave the vehicle. The shielding incorporated into here.
With an immersion in everything Humvee, under the hood and in the field, they will start from scratch with 48 hours to deliver a design for a new, improved Humvee. FiRe. It can strike anywhere, anytime, and with frightening speed, take human life. To protect us from its ravages, a rare breed of heroes are trained and willing to face the dangers down. And yet, as buildings grow ever taller, the tools at their disposal are increasingly not up to the task, and skyscraper denizens find themselves in mounting jeopardy.
Go up 10 stories, you're spent.
They run out of air in a position where they can't get out.
Lose a lot of people from the smoke.
New solutions must be found to keep not only our firefighters safe and able to do their job, but to provide innovative ways for escape. And so, with the unprecedented cooperation of New York's regional fire departments, we've assembled a team of experts in search of a solution. Our think tank will bring firefighting technology into the future.
Look at it now.
That is heavy.
This is really cool.
With an immersion in every aspect of firefighting, they will start from scratch with 48 hours to deliver new concepts for firefighters of the future.
In any event, the conceit of the show is that you throw 3 or 4 guys into a design problem. In the Humvee episode, the 4-star General Kern stood in front of us and said, "Gentlemen, you have 48 hours to come up with a new Humvee." The hero of 9/11, Fire Commissioner Von Essen, stood in front of us in a fire station in New York and said, "Gentlemen, you have 48 hours to come up with new ways in and out of burning buildings, rescue people, help the firefighters get up." Well, it's going to be a little easier for you guys. We've come up with a challenge that we think is appropriate for the themes you've all heard today. Portability seems to be a very major element of what people are interested in here at FiRe. We like to be able to carry things around with us that make us autonomous, that enable us to interact with the world in autonomous and very interesting ways. And in order to accomplish this, we've brought together 3 CTOs, although we're going to also recruit from you people out there as well if you find the challenge interesting. We've brought Tom Malloy, and he's the CTO of Adobe Systems, which we all know, and Jeff Bregman, who's CTO from Symantec, and Mark Bregman, I'm sorry, you're CTO of Adobe.
No, I'm CTO of Symantec, but I'm Mark Bregman. He's Jeff Nick.
This is going to look great on tape. Now you know why the show is canceled. I'm nervous around guys who actually have to accomplish something. I'm paid to be interesting. I'm not paid to be right. These guys are paid to be right. And we've brought Mark and Tom and Jeff on stage. They did not, when they paid their fee to come to FiRe, they did not expect to be put on the spot. Now, Mark is not going to be with us at the breakout. He's going to be talking about his own thing. But we're expecting some folks from the audience. If any of you are really interested in joining in the challenge, in the subject that I'm about to reveal, you're more than welcome to join us at the breakout and contribute your ideas too. And I guess we should have a drum roll of some kind as to what the topic is. We decided to take off on the theme of portability, of this business of autonomous power that we find in our pockets more and more in life, that we depend upon more and more. And I was inspired by what happened, by what I heard in New York, learning while preparing for the firefighting show, that basically everything broke down in our civilization on 9/11. The professionals whose job it was to anticipate problems and then prevent problems, the professionals fell apart that day. It wasn't totally their fault. Surprise happens. What it proved was that anticipation can't deal with everything. In civilization, you have to have something else. It's called resiliency. And the resilient citizens of New York and Boston basically fought this war for us that day. And they were armed with little devices in their pockets that empowered them to do one miracle after another, recording the events as they were happening, phone into the Twin Towers and say, no, the 911 operators are telling you to stay at your desks, get out. Cell phones saved probably 30,000 lives there, and cell phones were involved in saving more lives in the great rebellion of the passengers on flight UA-93. It was the moment of enhanced and empowered citizenship. And then we take a look at what happened a couple of years later in Hurricane Katrina. The systems fell apart. The professionals refused to cooperate with citizens. Anytime a citizen tried to stand up and say, let's do something, the universal response, Republican, Democrat, state, local, county, federal officials, was always sit still, don't do anything. And these almost formed a trade-off as to whether or not technologically empowered citizens are going to be able to really take their lives in their hands in daily life, and if and when there's another emergency. So the other thing that inspired Mark and me was the challenge that came out of last year's keynote interview with Paul Jacobs from Qualcomm, discussing the Swiss Army knife that we have in our pocket, the device that's aimed at trying to do everything that there are more cell phones, more people with cell phones than personal computers by a large margin around the world, and they use them. They have greater penetration into the third world. They're empowering people. Recent studies indicated that the arrival of a good, efficient cell phone system is the greatest single boost to a developing nation's rate of GDP development. And yet, of course, what Paul Jacobs was talking about last year was the pain that we all feel in dealing with an awkward user interface, which is only getting more and more awkward as we add bells and whistles and can openers to the Swiss Army knife. More radios, more Bluetooth, more GPS, more local area networks. Now we're getting 2 gigahertz processors on the phones. Mark has the dream that this device is going to replace the wallet. It's going to replace the credit cards. It's going to secure us from identity theft because it's going to have biometric. Now, all of these areas are having a lot of development, but they're being developed, and the ideas are coming from in-house, from Nokia, from Qualcomm. And we thought it would be kind of cool to take guys who are very, very savvy, who know technology, who know software, and yet aren't really enmeshed in the day-to-day of the cell phone. And some of you out there as well, if you're interested in this. This is the device you love to hate and you hate to love. This is the device that people flipped it out and they were empowered and they saved America. And yet in Katrina, they flipped it out and they had a fully charged, fully functioning radio that could communicate with nobody. The question is, gentlemen, as I act like General Paul Kern and as I act like Commissioner Von Essen, gentlemen, your assignment, should you decide to accept, is to have fun, enjoy FiRe, learn a lot, schmooze, and network. That's what you came for. But between, and eat. Eat great food, have fun, but between all that, your CTOs, you're used to squeezing in more. Between all that, your assignment, should you decide to accept, is to come up with the cell phone of tomorrow. Now, or several variants, just basically complain for us. Complain for all of us. Because there are some people out here who might be able to act on it. Now, to help you today, we went out and I was trawling all over the place, and finally, just a day or so ago, made contact with Joe Sterling, who is a renowned envisioneer. And he will play for you the role that Tim Flattery plays in the TV show. He's going to do sketches on foam board and sketch pads, and by Friday morning, may even have some animated and good visuals that we can put on screen. Now, I am experienced at this sort of thing, and I'm going to do something that no facilitator of such an event has ever done before. I'm vanishing. I'm going to be here at 4 o'clock in the breakout. I'm going to have a very light touch. You guys are in charge. Any volunteers you have, you're going to organize them. You're going to tell Joe that we want to sketch this, we want to envision this. And I'm going to be gone tomorrow. I'm hiding from you guys. You're not going to be able to find me. And then I'm going to show up on Friday morning. I'm going to be sitting right here, and I'm going to say, gentlemen, save us. What have you got? And it should be fun. In any event, that's one reason I'm hiding tomorrow. I have a spy among you who's going to call me tomorrow afternoon and say, David, don't even bother showing up if things aren't going well. So that's the general idea here. And your comments, guys, what do you feel off the top of your head about this process or about the scope of what you've been asked? We can expand it if you like, narrow it down if you like, or you could dive right into the subject of what really irks you about that Swiss Army knife in your pocket.
Well, it should be a very fun challenge. gives us an opportunity to leverage our consumer side as opposed to producer side a bit, which is a bit different for a CTO. I think it's the opportunity and the constraints associated with current cell phone technology are common to all of us. So it should be a lot of fun, and I'd very much welcome the help from all the participants at FiRe that have a pet peeve or have ideas as to something we can do differently. Fundamentally, for me, we're already seeing strides on the combinations of PDAs and having phone capabilities as well as some collaboration capabilities with email and BlackBerry capabilities, which I can't operate without. I've got my favorite device and I change them often. But if you look at the way people interact, it's more than just email and even more than just instant messaging. I mean, collaboration on an autonomous scale of individuals, to me, suggests secure sharing of information through wikis and blogging and secure rooms for content, as well as instant messaging, as well as voice and text, and harnessing all of those capabilities so that they were associated with your personalized device, I think would be a significant dynamic to take us forward. That's one of my pet peeves. You mentioned user interface. That's got to be the most challenging obstacle, I think, because I type much faster than I write, and certainly faster than I can thumb. And I'm still sending emails that make me out to be an idiot because I've hit a few wrong keys somewhere in the note, and so voice recognition, both in terms of our input and in terms of reading back to us what content we're getting is I think a very, very key area to be addressed. Mark?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting challenge. I think we have to realize that what we're going to come up with is probably a solution appropriate for the Western developed world, given who we are and our experience. I mean, you talked about a lot of collaborative things which are pretty interesting, but maybe not relevant if you're a sub-Saharan subsistence farmer.
Yeah.
And that's where a vast number of the next wave of users is going to come from. And so we ought to realize that we're not likely to come up with a universal solution.
I think that's a very good point. There was, when I was doing some of defense analyses about 4 or 5 years ago, one of the concepts that came up was the Volks radio. Actually, before the invasion of Iraq, an alternative concept was to drop about 1 million extremely cheap cell phones into Iraq and basically offer them a completely alternative, peer-to-peer based phone system. Naturally, it would be kind of crappy by our standards, but in the lower right-hand corner, there'd be a button saying CIA if you want to report anything. You don't have to, but and how could this be considered heinous? We've bombed them with something nice that happens to be totally undermining of a dictatorship. So sure, if you guys want to say, here is a secondary thing, that this is our $100 laptop, this is our $10 stamped phone for the masses out there in the world that would provide these things that would help their GDPs, that would help them fight their dictators. If you want to do that too, that would be highly cool.
Well, it's a really broad topic, and I think one of the things that we're going to have to come to grips with early on in our process is you, I think, hit on it already when you mentioned the term Swiss Army knife. I think one of the questions we have to face is whether or not we're trying to build a better Swiss Army knife or whether or not we really are bifurcating along several different lines to have specialized devices. And I'm looking forward to having that discussion amongst ourselves. And let me reiterate that there's no shortage of spots at the table if people want to come and help us out with this problem. I also think I agree with Jeff that ease of use is an incredibly fruitful angle for us to explore in terms of how to take the cell phone device to the next level. But I want to add one more thing, which I will bring to the table, which I think has the opportunity to make cell phones even more useful than they are today. And I'll just put it generally in what I would call the category of awareness. So in the context of awareness, people are talking now about location awareness, of having your cell phone behave differently depending on where it is. But I think there's other categories of awareness that we could take into account that would make for a better cell phone. There's awareness of, and I think this may be what you were referring to in terms of community-based communications, awareness of who else or what else is within your communication range. And finally, awareness of yourself, awareness of who you are, the device's awareness of who you are, so that it can adapt itself and serve your needs better. So those are the kind of things that I'm interested in exploring in this challenge.
Yeah. I think that Jeff raised a very good point about the notion of voice recognition. Obviously, we're going to want that, and that means that we're talking about the long-term trends also towards artificial intelligence, towards personal assistance, a personal mobile assistant. Mm-hmm. I think the PDA was kind of poisoned the water on that name. And there was a science fiction story, wearing my science fiction hat, about 40 years ago, that was one of only 2 science fiction stories before the Apple computer that got anything right, anything at all right about the future digital age. And everybody had what was called a jongleur, or a little French bard. And it would not only sing to you, there's your iPod, but it would also be essentially your butler. You would say, you know, what's traffic like, guide me there. And this was in this science fiction story from the 1960s. So in the long run, somebody who basically supplies you with not only skills and information, but some of the intelligence and wisdom that you sometimes feel you lack. No, don't go that way. You know, I would recommend you wait 5 minutes before sending this email.
I think the point that you brought up before is very compelling as well, which is that, you know, the emergent kind of nature of each of us actually having identity and having the ability to contribute through visualization or data transmission or collaboration forms to the collective knowledge at any point in time is very, very compelling. If we can harness that kind of instant emitters of information that can be correlated remotely, could provide us all kinds of, you know, triangulation, if you will, on current events, status, and warnings, danger. I mean, it could apply to just about every aspect of our lives, and we really haven't harnessed that dimension of carrying around this sensor and effector technology with us. And I think you used some good examples from like 9/11, et cetera.
I think one of the things that's very interesting, it's almost ironic, is that we've gone through this age of personal computers, which weren't very personal, and PDAs, which were not very personal. They're all mass market goods that are targeted to a stratum of our society. And the opportunity now is not probably the device itself, but through the way it gets used. And to your point, I think it's context awareness. It really can become much more personal, both in terms of projecting your persona and giving you that personal advice, that personal wisdom, knowledge. And that we're at the threshold of, and it's not the device itself, it's the whole network to which it's connected, which will be important.
Yeah. As Tom was saying, the awareness is not just awareness of your surroundings, although of course, I remember Paul Jacobs saying last year, the kids will want to have awareness not only where they are, and of course warnings can come of dangers and all that sort of thing, but also where their friends are. Mm-hmm. Being able to locate the network of who else is around. And I basically, I believe that I've been working on this separately, is the whole nation of the attention economy. It's been pointed out that human attention may be the fundamental limited supply item, the item in limited supply, and that helping us to allocate this is what our digital assistants are going to be about, because we want to be like gods, we want to see everything, but it's hard to take it in with our attention. I'm also concerned about something that you raised, and that is the whole notion of control. When the internet, it was only a decision made by about 80 important people in the United States mostly to decide to release the internet to the world. I was living in France at the time using Minitels, and they thought that was the way to go, a top-down oriented plan for how to get everybody connected and routing through the top and down. When the internet was released upon the world, these 80 people, this came as a total shock to me. It violated every principle of keeping control from the top. Changed the world completely. There are efforts in Web 2.0, Web 3.0 to kind of pull some of this back. Some third world, some of the rest of the world wants to pull back some strings away from ICANN. This tendency to pull the strings back into a hierarchy was seen in the extreme case in Katrina. And that's an example of where our cell phone system broke down because it could not have a secondary lateral way of self-organizing people. And it was this lateral self-organizing that enables people to be resilient when the towers go down, when the authorities are fumbling around. And I wonder if you think that is a feature that we need to think about.
That was actually the point I was making at the opening about the way people interact is changing dramatically, and it's not just about a phone call or an instant message or even an email. I mean, there's lots of different ways of interaction through collaboration. And wikis and blogs and the Web 2.0 phenomena, I think, can teach us something about our interaction through other technologies. To Mark's point, it's really not about the device. It's about, it's simply a conduit. And so different forms of collaboration in a Web 2.0 style need to fundamentally be looked at first and foremost in this effort, I think, because we're no longer just, this is another point that was made, it's not about us being consumers from people pushing stuff at us through their portal being this device. It's about being prosumers, where we're actually the producers as well.
I think two things are happening. One is the hierarchical structure of communication and knowledge is changing. And I think the other thing that's changing is the linear nature of it. And so things like blogs and wikis are very non-hierarchical, but also very non-linear. The idea almost of a conversation goes away, and these tools allow that.
Well, I think that we have a great idea about where things stand. Do we have time for a question from the audience? No? Okay. Oh, the 2-minute had me fooled. Well, in that case, it sounds like it's loads of fun. It sounds like there are ideas percolating here. And so let's think in terms of gathering together at 4 o'clock, although you guys can gather at lunch and start your informal sessions. You can meet Joe, your Envisioneer, in back, and we'll try to make Mark the genius once again for having come up with this idea.
Great.
Thanks a lot.